Hello friends and welcome to episode 59 of Noclip. Danny here with Jesse. How you doing, buddy?
Yo, doing great. Excited to talk about some beaten up things in an open world game. I hear there's swords involved. Right?
Yes. Happy Elden Ring Wednesday.
Woo!
We're recording this the day the embargoes have gone up for reviews. They went up about, 3 hours ago now, I think. And I was mostly just excited to see if anyone would score this thing because it's a big hunk of video game, Jesse.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about it a bit today. But not, again, same as kind of last week. I'm not really going to get into much of the spoilery stuff. For this game, I feel like spoiler could mean a lot of things. It could mean areas you find. It could mean gameplay mechanics. It could mean, I guess, story stuff. So none of that stuff. The way I think we're going to format this one is we're going to keep it entirely spoiler-free. And if something comes up that I think I'd like to talk about with you that sounds more spoilery, we'll kind of bench it and then do a break and then have that section. But I don't even know, to be honest, how spoilery we're going to get with this one. What's your experience though with these games, Jesse, before we get into it? What's like which class of Soulsborne did you reach?
Yeah, I gotta admit, you can take my fake gamer card and check it and check the ID on it. Yeah, no, I've only beaten Dark Souls 1.
All right.
I put a couple hours into Dark Souls 3, and that's it. I own Bloodborne. I have Sekiro. I have not touched them, unfortunately. I do like the Dark Souls games, to be fair. I like their aesthetic. I like the combat. The worlds are really interesting. I like the diversity of classes and stuff. But also, I don't even not like playing them. I'm just very bad at playing video games, and those are like brick walls to me. Sometimes I like bashing my head into one. Sometimes I don't feel like doing that.
And when it comes to Elden Ring, because it's funny, right? There's a lot of people in my replies this morning who are kind of maybe like, I mean, you've completed a Dark Souls, so that's pretty good. That's like sure, you maybe you don't know every boss in Sekiro, but like that's pretty decent. But there's a lot of people asking me about like, oh, could this be the one I get into? Are you interested in playing Elden Ring at all, or were you thinking you might pass on it before the reviews even came out?
Yeah, this morning I was looking at the games, just like gameplay stuff before we hopped into this, just to check out some trailers and things, because I hadn't even really seen any like pre-release footage of the game. Like I'd seen trailers that showed up at events and stuff, but that was kind of it. I didn't really have a ton of interest in playing this outside of like it's a cultural touchstone and you're probably going to have to play it if you want to know what's going on.
Right.
But I wasn't super excited for it until like I started watching the videos and then the reviews came out and it averaged 98. Like I know the scores are definitely based on reviews that are still in progress, but to see a 98 average for anything is like, okay, if you don't play this, what are you doing?
I think they have I think they have somehow managed to find themselves in the position where, and I don't want to say that this is like influences reviewers too much or is a disparaging on the quality of the game, but it's easy to give Elden Ring a 10, I think. And it's not just because it's like I don't know, and I haven't played enough of it. I've played like maybe 15 hours at this stage. But I think given the fandom and given how new and novel and interesting some of the aspects of Elden Ring are, I think it's an easy game to give a high score. So I think I do wonder if in 4 or 5 years' time, people will look back and say, oh, it was a bit overdone to a certain extent.
Right.
Like some of the stuff that's coming out about this, when people are saying it's like X and Y is kind of like, all right, let's like calm it a little bit. I don't know. But then again, who knows? Maybe more stuff happens. I think it's a tremendous game. I think it's like certainly a massive like step up from the type of games that they've made before. It's different in many ways. It's the open world nature of this thing just fundamentally sort of changes a lot about how these Soulsborne games have been made over the past while. But that being said, I do wonder once people read these reviews whether they'll have different expectations of it, because for me it was definitely a bit of a slow burn. Like it took like opening, whatever, a couple of hours, 6 hours for me to really start to see what was special about it.
Oh, wow.
But then, there are people who have played 80 and 50 hours of this thing, so who am I to say?
Yeah.
So this is Elden Ring from Software. It's coming out on Friday. That's February 25th. It's probably the day you're listening to this, or maybe the day after. Who knows? On PlayStation 4, Xbox Series X, Series S, PlayStation 5, Xbox One somehow, and also Microsoft Windows. We are going to jump into this and talk about stuff like difficulty and combat and performance and styles of play and the reviewing as well and all that sort of stuff. But Jesse, first of all, your opening salvo. What is the first thing you're interested to know about Elden Ring?
Man, there's so much that I'm curious about, like in terms of what is going on in this game. There's so many things I've seen. I think the biggest question I have, though, is does the Dark Souls style translate to an open world game in a way that's satisfying to you?
Yeah, so yes, so how to explain this without getting too much into the weeds. So basically, open world games are kind of easy in lots of ways, right? I mean, there are tricky ones like, I don't know, maybe Monster Hunter. I'm not sure if you call that an open world game, but like there are games where you sort of have to like, I don't know, bite down on the mouth guard and get through certain sections. And the Soulsborne-y stuff, you reach these cul-de-sacs. Like the game is kind of all about these cul-de-sacs where like you have no choice but to try and beat this boss, and you aren't going to brute force your way through it. Probably, I mean, you can probably level up your specs and all that sort of stuff, but like ultimately, you're gonna have to like play the game really well and figure it out and get your skills up to beat a certain boss. And open world games are sort of incongruous to that because open world games are generally trying to just get you to tick the things off the box. They're not really trying to put those things in front of you. And also, in an open world game where there's lots of stuff to do, you can just go do something else.
Yeah.
What I'm excited about with this is that they really lean into that. There is lots of something else to do in this world. There are those big bosses. There are bosses that gate a new area that you will have to get through, whether you like it or not. But there are also loads of other things to do in this world which take 5 minutes or 20 minutes or are like mini bosses or are things that will help you spec up. So maybe the bosses aren't as hard.
Nice. So there's like a lot of smaller things that are satisfying in the world. It's not just like a lot of bigger set pieces.
Yeah, which the other game had to a certain extent. But I think yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, without saying anything. Nice. That's good. That's something I was curious about because I'm always looking to figure out if there's like smaller things to do in open world games. That's what I'm falling in love with in Horizon. It's just doing little things for people and also just exploring the world and seeing how they set stuff up. So I'm excited to see that stuff in Elden Ring. I was actually talking to my girlfriend's dad about this. He's a huge Dark Souls 1 fan. He's been playing it like almost nonstop for the last 2 years on PS5, which is PS4 and PS5.
Wait, Demon Souls? You mean?
No, like Dark Souls.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He's playing on PS5.
Yeah, the back compat. I don't know, whatever. He
cool.
just has
All
a
right.
PS5. Yeah. And he's been playing it like crazy. He's super excited for Elden Ring. Like he's over the moon about this game coming out. Something I asked him, and he made a really good point because he's been reading so much about the game. I was thinking about Dark Souls, like the style it has for when you die or when you want to level up is you sit at the bonfire. And when you sit at the bonfire, things respawn. Now, in Dark Souls, I think that makes sense, right? Because the areas are so kind of closed off and cordoned, and when you sit at a bonfire, there's usually like shortcuts between places. So if you've gone through something already, it's okay because you've got a quicker way to get back to where you were, typically if you've gone back to a bonfire. But with this being an open world game, there's so much stuff everywhere, and like that's the way you level up. So in Elden Ring, do the bonfires get in the way of the design of an open world, or are there things in the game that make it easier to make that work? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess it in many ways it acts the exact same as those old games. Without getting too much into the weeds on it, because ultimately in the old games, if you were having trouble with beating a boss, you could just farm the right area.
Yeah.
That gave you a good sort of XP to difficulty ratio. And that's kind of the same here if you wanted to. The one thing I'll say about the campfires, or they call them, it's like what are they called? Grace is the thing you're looking for in this game.
Okay.
And they're like areas of grace or places of grace or something like that. But they effectively work the same way. And yes, if you rest at one, everything respawns. Because the game is open world, like you can just run around shit. Like you also have a horse, and so you can like run past stuff. So like even if you pull a mob, you can just keep going. It's not that big a deal. There are also campfires absolutely everywhere, and on top of the campfires, there are also these like they're basically checkpoints. They're like these little statues. You'll notice them, but you don't even have to like go up and touch it really to activate one. If you die, like they have them in certain places where basically the game knows, look, we don't want to put a million campfires on this because we're still trying to pretend like this game is hard. So we're just going to hide a bunch of these little checkpoints. And then you basically, when you die, you can decide to go back to a campfire or the latest one of these. I think they're like Myrna statues or something. I forget what they're called. Everything in this game, I forget what it's called. I'm sorry. There's a million different, like welcome to another one of these games where you are finding seeds and tears and, combining fucking, whatever nonsense. What did I find? Land octopus ovaries I was messing with earlier. So, so it just kind of, it takes a bit of getting used to, because you're kind of used to playing these games where you're basically holding your breath between checkpoints, where you're like trying to wait to get to the next one, or trying to get to the next door or ladder you can drop or gate you can open that acts as a shortcut. There's a lot less of that type of thing going on, so it just ultimately becomes less of an issue, I think. And also you can just like fast travel out of places whenever you want. So like,
oh, nice.
If you're in like a cave, if you're in like a dungeon and you've gotten all of these, they're not souls. What is it again?
Runes?
Thank you. God, yeah. Thank you. Yes, runes. If you've gotten all these runes and you're like, oh no, I have like 1,800 runes and I want to just like get out of here because I'm stuck and there's this big boss that's trying to kill me, you could just fast travel to one of the campfires. Like,
nice.
You just pop the map and you can fast travel literally anywhere at any time.
Do you have to be like away from enemies, I would assume? Yeah.
You have to be like not in active combat.
Okay.
But even if something is like stuff like the pulling in this game in terms of like how the mobs, I'm using the word mob and pulling because it's basically like an MMO. Like you have a fairly decent distance between you and an enemy before you get their attention. And also there's just less of that like Dark Souls-y, oh, there's a guy hiding behind this door shit. Like they just, I don't know,
okay.
maybe it got old or something, but like they just don't kind of do that anymore because I guess they don't have to. It's not about learning. Like it has that really cool micro element of like you get to really learn the ins and outs of these buildings, but the world is so big and there's so many hidden things, and so many of the hidden things are like way cooler than you were expecting. And so the density of the world and all that sort of stuff is so different to those games that just the flow of it is crazy different. It kind of reminds me of like in Demon Souls where you have the I think it's 5 of those altar stones or whatever they're called, the 5 different worlds. And this is kind of like, oh, they just put those like 5 different worlds all on the same map and you can fast travel between them or ride your horse between them. It's that type of thing.
Okay, so there's fast travel. It sounds like there's actually a lot of elements of previous open world games that make this system work without getting in the way of things. At least it seems, anyways. But like, so I think of Dark Souls, and I think of very cordoned off areas and stuff, and I don't think of like discovery in the same way that I think of it in like Breath of the Wild or Far Cry, that kind of open world. But which between the two does this kind of land on? I feel like games are always kind of going, you're saying there's no checkpoint. It's not the big checkpoint system. So is it closer to Breath of the Wild in terms of its exploration? There's no like things to climb to the top of and scan around and set markers on. Is that something that you're doing in this?
Yeah. So there are, I don't want to.
Yeah, I guess, can we say, are there towers? Is that a spoiler?
We're gonna put something in the spoiler lights section.
Okay.
One thing is in the spoiler light. We've added one notch to the spoiler light. There will be a second section of this. So there aren't like towers. There aren't. The world is meant to be explored. So, and you can explore a lot of it right away. Like there's very little gating you in terms of like, you just want to go run into the hard part of the game or anything. Like, I mean, again, there are loads of parts of the maps that I have not been to. I think also the map is maybe an unreliable narrator here. There's probably other stuff going on.
Right.
I don't know. Outside the map, I couldn't tell you. But you know, if you want to, again, MMO style, just like ride your level 10 paladin into Duskwood, you can just go right ahead and do it. And it's cool. And you can, like, you know, find a checkpoint and then get the fuck out of there if you want at any stage or whatever. But in terms of the like exploration, it's very much in the ilk of, you know, you don't have a quest log in this game.
Okay.
So I think that's the way in which it like fundamentally is different from a lot of open world games. You have the equivalent, I would say, of, you know, most open world games have some sort of encampment or city or dungeon. You know, you have lots of those things that are clearly self-contained areas that you want to get to the end of or the top of to collect a thing. There are somewhat repeatable things in the world. Like most open world games have like something that like, oh, every area has like one or two of these things. Like, it's an open world game, so there is that. Like, you will find that every area has a X and every area has a Y, and you might bounce between those areas to try and find all those things. But then also, one of the cool things in this is that you're very often like just stumbling into stuff, like hidden dungeons. There are like lots of like, oh, this little busted downtown had some steps down into this dungeon, and this dungeon might be 2 rooms big or it might be 20 rooms big. A lot of those, though, as well, follow a similar sort of pattern. What I'm saying is, like, once you've played this game for 15 hours, there are like interesting dynamic things that happen and new and novel things. Like, I just had something happen which had never happened before and led me to a cool thing, and I was like, oh, that's neat, that's really cool. But there are also, like, you know, if I wanted to now, I could tell you like 6 different things that are in the open world that you will do 6 of, you know what I mean? So it's not like fully organic in that way, but it definitely feels like something more like a Breath of the Wild, where you have these sort of, you know, a nice go between having things that you kind of know what they are after a while, and that's satisfying and good, but also think the exploration itself is super organic. And that's like when you played like Dark Souls, for instance, like, you know how like tricky it was to, like, your character wasn't exactly like, you know, spry and like easy to get around. So in this one, you have a jump button, obviously. You know, Sekiro has come and gone, so we have a jump button now. You have a horse that can do double jumps, which is hilarious.
Yeah, and like uses those jets that are on the ground or whatever's going on.
Yeah.
Floating horse.
Yeah,
Sure, why not? Yeah.
I love in these games, like in a game like this when everything is so weird and like the landscape makes no sense and everything, you can just put these like little tornadoes that they basically jump. They're just like jump pads for the horse. And they launched the horse way higher than it needed to go, and it looks stupid, but like
so
nobody
awesome.
cares.
Yeah, fuck it, why not?
And that's basically a way of them being like, oh, this game is like all about valleys and mountains, and we need to get you up here without using fast travel all the time. And there's some like, but also like, you know, one of the, you know, there are a number of large self-contained levels, like sort of like super large, like a castle, for instance. That's you'll see it right at the start when you spawn in. It's where one of the first bosses. So that's kind of in the typical Soulsborne ilk of like, oh, here's a much bigger style map. It's a huge castle, and you have to, you know, get to the end of it to get to the main boss, right? That's super Soulsborne-y.
Yeah.
What's different about it in this is that like there are often multiple ways into the castle. There are multiple ways through the castle.
Okay.
I actually got to the first boss by basically figuring out, and it wasn't that hard. Like I think the game sort of like nudges you in the direction, but I figured a way through that basically let me skip, I would say, 70% of the map. I just like
shit.
I like used the jumping and the horse and running across rooftops and doing all this stuff and like doing sketchy jumps and walking around, and in a way that was like, oh, clearly the game like has set this up. I'm not like breaking the game, but also this was super cool that I was able to get around all this shit.
That's great that there's like intentional ways to play like that, because, you know, Dark Souls is very, as good as it is, it's still, there's ways to kind of, like you're saying, like kind of mess with the game and do things improperly, and that's funny. But it sounds like there's a lot more opportunities to approach things in different ways that like make it a very individual playthrough.
Yeah, I feel like in Dark Souls, you often, once you had completed an area, you could see an alternative way through it that would be easier.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, it seems like they are allowing you to do that right away more so. Like I've had that happen in multiple different areas where it's like, oh yeah, like there's clearly a B path to this if you think about it in a different way.
Nice. You said a little earlier that you've put, what, 15, 20 hours into the game now?
Yeah, yeah, I think just shy of 15.
Right.
I was up to 12 last night and I played a bunch this morning.
When did you get access to this? Around the same time everyone else
The game?
did? Yeah.
So I'm not sure, even now, I'm not sure if we're allowed to say too much about the embargo. Did have details on like not being able to speak about some of it, but like people have had less than a week on this.
That's crazy.
To review it.
Yeah.
Which is like, I mean, it depends which way you look at it, I think. So I think coming off Horizon, and this is a very much a publisher by publisher thing. Like Sony generally get games out really early to people.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember Death Stranding was weeks beforehand. God of War usually would be The Last of Us. Horizon Zero Dawn was as well, I'm pretty sure. And then Forbidden West, I think it was like almost 3 weeks before the game came out.
Right.
Which is good because that game is really big.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can attest to that yourself. So I don't know if so most Soulsborne games aren't this big. This one's really big. Like they're dense. Like you can keep playing them for months and years because there's all the different classes and different ways of playing stuff and subsystems and crafting and all that sort of stuff. Just like on the like sheer amount of shit to do in this game is really big. Like the IGN reviewer I think did 80 hours, and like to me that's like
in a week
easily. Yeah, so like doing that in that's absolutely
But still,
insane.
putting 87 hours into a game like that, they probably didn't even scratch the surface. Like, they probably beat it. They said they beat it right on Twitter or something like that. But.
Yeah, I think 80 will probably get you pretty far to having seen quite a lot of that game.
Yeah.
I don't think by 80 hours you haven't scratched the surface, but like I think by 15, I have kind of scratched the surface. You know what I mean? Like I was talking to some people about it a few days ago who had played like twice as much as me and had still like only beaten the first boss and been like, what the fuck? Like, how is anyone going to review this thing? So yeah, I think the push pull there is like, you know, ultimately it's give video game websites and reviewers who decide that they want to have a scored review up on the day.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you know, reviews are a grace that the publisher gives media outlets. You know, it's part of their marketing, it's part of their PR push, all that sort of stuff. But there is no like rule that says if you get this code, you have to review the game by such a date. I'm not even reviewing the game. They just gave me a code. Thank you very much. I asked and said, hey, I don't know if we're going to do anything, but it'd be sure would be cool to play this Elden Ring video game.
Here you go,
I got
Danny.
a code. So thank
Enjoy.
you. So yeah, so for me, it's kind of like that. I feel like, you know, people probably put themselves through hell to get this thing reviewed. I would also say that sounds like the worst possible way to play this game.
Yeah.
But then reviewing often is, because I am enjoying this game. I'm going to slowly let it drip for weeks and months and probably stay away from VADVD videos on YouTube for the next couple of weeks until I've figured out a lot of the shit myself.
Mm-hmm.
But it's big. It's like, it's super big. And I'm enjoying the open world stuff so much. Like, I haven't beaten that first main boss yet. I'm like, if I gave myself like 4 hours, I could do it. Like, he's not that difficult. I've beaten like maybe 6 other bosses in the world. They come in so many different flavors. There's a sort of mini boss right at the start. There's a boss on the way to that first big main boss. It's kind of different to the other games. So I guess technically I've killed like, yeah, a bunch of other ones, and then there are optional ones you can find. But yeah, I don't care. I'm off in the world doing shit.
I'm having fun.
You know.
Nice. What are you playing this on, by the way?
PS5 and
PS5.
So yeah,
Okay.
I've heard the CPU requirements for PC are pretty high.
Really?
So it's gonna be interesting to see what streamers make of it, especially I think. So I would say on the PS5, I think Demon's Souls Remake has spoiled us all.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first couple of hours of this game, I was a little bit like, "Aw," like.
Oh, it doesn't look that good?
I mean, it doesn't look as good as Demon's Souls
Yeah,
Remake, but
that's
like,
what I'm saying,
how possibly could
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Because
seriously.
that game is like, those levels are fairly tight, you know. I mean, there's some big areas in there, but like, it's not an open world game, so it's not doing a lot of the like CPU stuff that those games require. It's not spinning as many plates. And also it's made by, you know, that's Blue Point, and they're you know, I've heard Miyazaki in an interview saying that like, oh, Demon's Souls Remake was like, you know, seeing video of that really made us up our game. And this game doesn't look like bad. I think I had to reset my expectations a little bit at the start when I started playing it. I'm playing in 60 frames a second mode, which looks slightly muddier than the, you know, well, like maybe a good bit muddier than the performance or than the quality mode, which is 4K or whatever. I don't know. I put it on for 20 seconds.
You didn't count the
like,
pixels?
Fuck
No?
no. I counted the frames. It was like,
Yeah.
nope, absolutely
You gotta
not.
call John Linneman and ask him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're gonna. I can't wait to see what they do when they put out there.
Yeah, seriously.
Go check out Digital Foundry shit whenever that pops. Yeah, for me, I playing on PS5. It's been solid, but like in 60 frames a second, it dips every now and again. But like it's kind of inconsistent when it dips. It's almost like it's loading a part of the level or something, and it's very slight. There's some texture pop stuff, but again, I don't care. And like the thing about this game is like the reason why you're playing it for in terms of aesthetic is the art direction, and the art direction is terrific.
Yeah.
So it's really solid. It does HDR well. I don't think the DualSense stuff is particularly, I didn't notice. Somebody asked me on Twitter, like, how does it do DualSense? I didn't even notice. Like, so I don't. Probably not much. Less than Horizon, if that's the answer.
Right.
And less than Demon's Souls, because those games I noticed. But I also don't care.
Yeah, that's going to be a running question, I feel like, for the rest of this generation. Maybe the first couple years of like, how does this use the... I bothered you with that about Horizon, because I'm curious if it's doing the zipper stuff that they did in Astro's Playroom.
Astro, I know, right?
Yeah.
When Astro makes another game, then we'll have another high watermark for it.
Exactly. Yeah. But performance is solid. Yeah. Solid. Well, solid enough. It feels good to play. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels good. Exactly. I think that's ultimately, do I feel like this game is good to hit the button and see what happens on screen? And yeah, it does. It does the job. I don't care otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, it's working on last gen consoles, like, and it must look pretty solid. Well, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
have you seen anything of that actually? Did you get to try that at all? No.
I would be very skeptical of how, first of all, obviously those are not hitting 60. And I think, I couldn't play this game, and I can't play anything, and that's not in 60 now anyway. Because as much as we've not had the 4K revolution necessarily on those games, and there's been some AI upscaling, and I think that's totally fine, legitimate. But like in terms of frame rate, I think the PS5 has been amazing. Like it's all those games run at 60 and they're great.
Yeah,
so
seriously,
I'm happy. So yeah, I don't expect a Cyberpunk situation, but I think that game is probably not going to look super solid on Xbox One.
Well, it's crazy. We're seeing a very different approach, I think, with a lot of the newer games coming out. Like Horizon looks fantastic on PS4, and Dying Light 2 looked great on... Yeah, it looks like amazing. Right. I watched the Digital Foundry on that, and that was good. And I played Dying Light 2 on Series X, but I also played a little bit of it on the original Xbox, like launch Xbox One. And it looked good. Like, I think that's something we're seeing change in the generation. And like you're saying, Elden Ring, while it still looks good, it's not like using every single transistor on the processor of the PS5 to its full extent or anything. So I imagine it'll look pretty okay on PS4. Performance-wise, yeah, probably 30. Loading will be weird. But I think at the end of the day, like you're saying, the art direction of a Dark Souls game is a big deal for it. And that's going to translate well no matter what console or PC you're playing on. As long as you're getting a decent performance out of it, you'll like it. Speaking of art direction, how ugly is this game? Because I feel like Dark Souls games are really gross. Like Dark Souls 1 was disgusting in the best way possible. It was very gross. It was very slimy. Everything was wet. How much of that is in here? Is it a lot more cloth and nice, or is it still relatively gross? Are things throwing up on me in Elden Ring?
No, yeah, it kind of reminds me actually more of like the Boletarian Palace. Like it's in Demon's Souls. It's kind of like there's a nice sheen to this game. There's like there's a lot of white rock that's sunblasted, and like beautiful big castles that are made of like white stone. So I think it's like there are definitely like muggy parts of this game. There's I won't get into it, but there is I think the review guide we got actually said don't show anything past these areas, and these areas were largely the ones that they've shown in the trailers already, where you're seeing like the lake and all the stony, the grassy areas, the stony stuff. Like the game goes some fucking places in terms of like aesthetics that are like super striking. Like they look like fantasy book covers. Like some of the areas are just like holy shit. So but I will say, like, and there have been a couple of ones that I'm like, oh, I've never seen that in one of their games before. But also there's a lot of like, oh yeah, here's the swamp, and here's the cave, and here's
the swamp. Check it out. Is Shrek in this game? Is there a hut? No.
There's lots of. Is there donkeys? There's no donkeys. There's lots of there's lots of animals everywhere.
I'll pay for that DLC if they add a Eddie Murphy DLC where your horse is.
Well, I don't know about Eddie Murphy.
Oh yeah, good point. Actually, yeah, I always forget.
Yeah, it's like a long list now of people we can't talk about. Yeah, I would say there's animals everywhere. It's really weird, actually. That's one of the things where this game feels a little bit janky, is that you're just like constantly seeing these fucking sheep and owls and stuff. You're just chopping them up for bits, and you can craft stuff out of the bits. And yeah, some of the animation on that stuff is a little bit like, whatever, PS3. But in terms of, yeah, like how it has all the mainstays, and even I would say to like, I think here's a big question I actually want to kind of answer, and it kind of leans into this, which is the people who are maybe trying to once again get back into these games. I think Sekiro was one that a lot of people got scared away from, and I am right there with them. I've played maybe 5 hours of that game, and it's always been the first hour over and over again. It's really hard. I think Bloodborne was the one that got a lot of people into that, got me into those games. And I think this is opening that door a little bit again, where folks are kind of thinking about it. I think this would be a tough first one of these games to get into, if only because the expectation of an open world game leans one way, and the expectation of one of their other games leans a different way. If you've played any other games, and I've not played, I've completed Bloodborne, I have almost completed Demon Souls, I've played a good amount of Dark Souls 1, and I've peppered a bit of Dark Souls 2 and 3, very little, and Sekiro 2. But for me, like, it's helpful to have the base line of like, oh, I know generally how to like engage mobs. I know how to manage stamina and roll and block. I know that all of these games have handled it differently, and that this game also does too. So a lot of the, I imagine, early frustrating hurdles I was able to sort of get past pretty quick, because I know what these games are. So I would say it would be a tough one to jump in first, but it would be, if you've played it, like, you already know if you're going to play this game. If you like Soulsborne games, you're going to fucking love this thing.
Right.
It's brilliant. If you don't, because you found them too like cul-de-sac-y, like there's too many like of those big boss fights that you just have to like get through, I think this game does a lot to help you avoid that shit. You can go out into the overworld and level up your character, or get certain traits or items that will maybe help you with those bosses. Almost all of the bosses, I guess I shouldn't say that, I've only played 15 hours. Any of the difficult bosses I have met, I have managed to either have by default or unlock an AI companion to help you fight them.
Okay.
So they had this in one of the trailers. So the first boss you meet, there's one by default. So you can basically press a button. You don't have to use them, which is really cool, I think. But to me, this is a way of them messing with the difficulty. I think this game actually does a lot to address a lot of the difficulty stuff with these games. Tamor seemed to suggest it doesn't. So I'm wondering later in the game, maybe stuff gets a little bit more cul-de-sac again. I'm not quite sure. But being able to basically spawn in an AI to help you take half the health of this fucking boss down is like a big deal. So
nice.
That can help you like sort of, almost brute force some of those bosses, like you can kind of do in some of those games.
You don't feel like a fake gamer for summoning AI assistants? Come on.
It's funny. Like, I definitely felt like, to me, playing these games is very much the first time through is kind of like, I want to get through it. And then the second time through, I feel like I've always learned how to play these games once I've completed them. And then the second time through is me like finessing it.
Yeah.
So some of these bosses, I'm like, oh, I'll have you down better once I've played another 50 hours of this.
Exactly. I felt the same way with the bell gargoyles, man. Like, people were like, "Don't spawn whoever to help you with the bell." Screw you, dude. I'll come back when I've beaten every other boss, and then I'll just trounce them like I did. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so Elden Ring is everything I've wanted. It's a 98. It's the perfect game ever made. Well, what score would you give it, Danny, out of 10? You've played 15 hours. You can give an accurate depiction of the entire game and summarize it for the rest of history. Your opinion will be kept here on the podcast. What would you give it? 9,
if
right?
I had to give it a score, I mean, I've only played a little bit, so I've only played like 15 hours. Yeah. I'd probably give it an 8 at the moment. It's doing a lot of, like, I'm really enjoying it a lot. It's a marked, I don't know, what is it? If I actually think about it, I don't know. Here's the real thing. I don't know if they could just make another one of those games. And that's not to say that all of those games have been samey, but they're all interesting to people because of how different they are to each other.
Yes.
And I think Sekiro was demonstrative of that at a certain point you're just appealing to various subsections of your audience, and while that's interesting and novel and can make some really cool games and make some really special games, and Sekiro is absolutely a special game and very important to a lot of people, I think they've done that now a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And I think it was kind of time to do something different, and this game does something different. It has done something different, which most games over the past 10 years have done, which is go open world. I think we've talked about it a lot over the years on this podcast, and I've talked about it on the Boncast and stuff, where like everything trended open world, like racing games, first person shooters, online shooters. It's a byproduct of just design, but also the scale of online competitive stuff, the ability for us to, create these much more complex, richer, more detailed, larger worlds. So in many ways, like, I don't think this is like some sort of fucking revolution. It's like they made another one of these games and they realized they needed to do something different, and they did open world stuff, and they did it in a very interesting, what some people would say, Breath of the Wild type way. I don't think this is like that. Nobody's reinvented the fucking wheel here.
Okay.
I think a lot of the stuff in it is super special. I think there's more From Software in this game than there's ever been in a From Software game. There's just so much of it, and so much of it's great. And I think that's what's really cool. It's like, imagine playing Bloodborne 2, and Bloodborne 2 was like 7 times bigger than Bloodborne 1. You'd lose your mind.
Right.
And that's kind of what this is. It's just so big, and there's so much cool shit in it, and there's so much stuff from their old games in it, and it doesn't get in the way of itself. It's not too overly concerned about, like, being a video game. Like, you can just fast travel places. You can just collect as much shit as you want. You can, it does the obfuscating stuff, very well. I still think, I think Jason Schreier earlier this morning was saying you kind of need a notepad and pen with this one because it has no quest log, and that is totally the case. I think maybe that's an area where the game gets a little bit wobbly for me, is that there's some stuff that was said to me which I forgot, and now I can't remember it. So I guess I'll have to go to a guide to figure out. One person told me to, if I see X at a certain time, then do this like salute and something will happen. And I'm like, well, I was not writing that down, so I guess I don't,
Yeah.
So I think it's like, I don't think it's necessarily the perfect jumping off point for people to come into this series. I think if you're a fan of these games, it's a 10. I think if you're a person who wouldn't play these games, it's a whatever. Doesn't matter. Review scores are silly.
Mm-hmm.
I think for what this game could have been, they did a fantastic job. And again, caveat, I'm only 15 hours in.
Well, hey, good. I'm personally, I'm excited to give this a try over the weekend. I'm one of those people that like Dark Souls, but the parts of it that I wanted more of were never really represented in the other games that I played. This seems like it finally answered it. And like you're saying, it's more Dark Souls. So I'm looking forward to getting to it soon. But is that everything you wanted to bring up in this spoiler-free section before we start ruining the game for everyone in about 5 minutes?
Well, I only have one thing for the spoiler light section.
There are some questions I have.
Okay. Well, let's keep those. I think maybe, what would be the last thing? A lot of this game is going to feel familiar to people that played the other ones. Like, combat-wise, Sekiro did a lot of different stuff. Like Bloodborne obviously did with the parry stuff with the gun.
Mm-hmm.
I've only played one class. I played like the sort of like boring default, person with a sword and shield. I would say that this game, kind of like Sekiro, really wants you to go two-handed and do timing properly, avoid strikes rather than blocking them.
Yeah.
But it does have this one thing, which I'll say this one thing. It's not a spoiler. They teach you it in the tutorial. There's a combat tutorial at the start of the game. Has this crazy mechanic which basically contradicts what I just said. So I think for the bosses and a lot of the harder enemies, you really need to avoid and, make sure you're not fat rolling and like getting out of the way of shots, and countering and doing stuff like that, and then staggering and getting your crits in and all that sort of stuff. But they have this thing where if you block an attack successfully, which can just mean holding the shield up and someone hits you. If you hit the right trigger immediately afterwards, you basically give them a massive shot back, which in many cases can also like stagger them. So then you can do a crit, which seems like the easiest way to kill people because you just wait for them to hit you and then you just fuck them up. And there's like little cost to it. So I think that is one way in which the game sort of like allows players to kill a lot of like easy mobs like one-on-one, because this sort of stuff, it doesn't work as good if you're you still have to do the Dark Soulsy things of separating people and doing all that sort of stuff and making sure you're not getting hit from behind and yada yada. But like as an initial like mechanic to like get you to like kill stuff, it's a massive bonus because you can in the worst case scenario you just block someone and try and crit them back, which is pretty cool. It also does a thing where you have like your sort of like health flask things in it. If you kill kind of an undefined group of people, like if you came across a mob in the open world of 5 people and you killed them all, you'll be given some of your health flasks back.
Oh,
sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's like more, but like, yeah, it's like a bonus for killing them. So I guess it's a way of like getting you to finish a group rather than, just running away or whatever, or like not caring that you're using a lot of your health flasks. So there's all this stuff in there that's definitely there to like ease the transition or to make it not as difficult. So I wanted to get that in the spoiler-free section before we get into the spoiler. And again, spoiler light, we're going to keep this very, very, very light spoiler, but just like, one step in as opposed to not in at all.
Mm-hmm. And that's nice for me too, because I'm going to be playing this when you guys are listening to this, so Danny won't spoil it for me either. Thanks. I appreciate that, man. You're so kind.
No problem.
Yeah.
What type of asshole would I be?
Right. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to listen to some nice Elden Ring tunes, and we'll see you in just a second. Welcome back. I hope you like those nice tunes. A little bit of Elden Ring music for you. Set the stage for the spoilers we're about to do.
Very light spoilers. We're not doing spoilers.
Very light spoilers.
Very,
super
very
light. Super light.
Super
cliff
light
notes
spoilers.
of the cliff notes
Exactly.
of the spoilers of this game. There are characters in it. We might talk about that. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. But the first thing Danny's got here, and I don't know what this question mark is here for, but map.
Yeah. So
what's going on?
One of the things that I said was, you asked about like how, I forget what the question was in the first one, but you asked about like whether or not, I don't know, something to do with the map, or whether
like
or not
marking locations or something.
Yeah, that's what it was. Sorry, it was about. So there are, the map is basically like, so most open world games, the map is, I'm not going to tell you what's in the map or anything, but I'll see how it's revealed, and it's cool. Is that in most open world games, like let's take Horizon for instance, you have the sort of fog of war thing, right, where you're kind of like, oh, I can't see anything, and then when I go in an area, I see stuff, or like you climb a tower and it tells you all the shit that's there. So there's no towers or anything like that. But there is the map itself is like totally grayed out, but there are basically these sort of like obelisks in the game which you just walk up to, and they have a map for that area, but you have to find them, which is cool. So oftentimes you'll actually be in an area running around, and when you go to your map, it's still all gray. Like maybe it has waypoints on it, or maybe it has like some of the lanterns on it, but like you can't actually see anything on the map, so you have to find those, and they're always on the road, and so it's like a fairly easy thing to just go up and scoop them up once you kind of figure out how to find them. So that's helpful, because it sort of it's a great way to get you to go looking for that, and then it only shows you a section of the map, which is pretty cool. And I think that was it. But yeah, there's no like, you can sort of buy, I think they're like rumors almost, like in Horizon, you can buy knowledge from some of the vendors. Like each area of the map has their own little guy who sells stuff, and it's usually like pretty separate. Like one guy mostly sells stuff for crafting, like beasts, like things that taken from animals, and one guy sells like some stuff for like, doing whatever, this thing or that thing. And they're not even on the map, I don't think. Yeah, you just have to kind of remember where they are. But you can sometimes buy like sort of, I think you can buy things that go on your like waypoints to go on your map, basically, like where it'll show a castle or something like that. I forget, but it's very organic. Like generally, the uncovering the world in this game is like for me has been the most fun part so far.
Nice. Yeah, that's something I really liked about Breath of the Wild as well. Like, you marking the map is always something that's enjoyable. So, like, when you can go back and say, this is this, like when you can mark it with a specific icon, that's something you can do in this too, yeah?
Yeah, I didn't do much of that stuff in this, to be honest.
Okay.
You can do that. I think for me, it was like helpful to figure out where like coastlines were and stuff. Oftentimes you're standing on like a part of the world and looking at like something in the distance and trying to figure out like where is that? Is that part of this continent part? Is this over here? Is that an island? I don't fucking know. So some of that stuff has been fun, but it's not like Breath of the Wild where you're like being able to like climb mountains and see like and float down on your leaf or whatever. It's not that. But yeah, the way they do that is actually really cool as well, because like you see the waypoint in the world sticking up kind of like that. And when you delete it, it sort of like flickers away, which is quite cool.
That's
actually.
cool.
It has a nice effect.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about the world and everything and the design and how it looks in the first half here, but I'm very curious because Dark Souls, the thing that I always really liked about it is how it's kind of dead and how there's nothing really going on in terms of like regular characters and stuff. But every once in a while, you'll hear a sound and you'll go towards it and there's this freaky motherfucker that's just like doing whatever. Like when you finish the castle, like where the bell gargoyles are, and you go down and you hear the hammer going and it's one of the blacksmiths, and you show up and he's talking and he's got all this character. He's relatively verbose. I'm like, this is great. This is what I love about Dark Souls, and when I meet a big freak. But Elden Ring is an open world game with a lot of weird stuff going on. There's a lot of enemies running around, and everything I see, everything looks gross, and I love it. It's great. There's a lot of weird characters and NPCs. But how alive is this world? Am I still running through the husk of a place, or are there a lot of characters that you get to interact with?
I mean, it's the same as all the other Souls games, where like there's no like schools,
right? There's no town you're walking around in.
No.
Okay.
It's like it's like again, 15 hours in, there's big parts of the map I've not seen, there's big areas I've not been to, whatever. But like the vibe of what I've experienced so far is very much in the the cosmic purgatory or whatever of these worlds, where it's just
right.
It's full of freaks and they're all shambling around and not they're protecting a castle for God knows what reason. And they're, there's these, like, you've seen them in the trailers, maybe they have these convoys of these big lads who are pulling these like trucks almost behind them, and they'll have a big convoy of like guards and shit behind them. And like, if you open these things, they have, if you get access to the trunk thing, there's special items in them and all that sort of stuff. But like, you're like, why are they doing that? Like, it's not like, yeah, it's just this, like, it's the same type of, yeah, cosmic purgatory, I guess, is the only thing I can really call it. Which makes sense as well, because like every time you go to a campsite, they all respawn, right? So, so yeah, it's similar, and you will find again people much like those old games who are more, dare I say, normal than some of the mobs, or like know things, or like, are they tricking you, or like, I'm one of you, I'm a tarnished, or I'm a this, or I'm a that, or that, and like, who's telling the truth, all that sort of stuff. But like, yeah, it's like, there is a doll character in this game, like all the other ones, it's very much in the ilk of those games in terms of like tone and story. Like the story is as obtuse as any of their old games, which again is like a feather in its cap. It's not, it's part of the interest in these games. There's been a lot of I have noticed a lot of Gaelic spelling of things in this game. Cool. Which is neat because you don't see it very often. There are like letter consonant and vowel combinations that happen in Irish all the time that never happen in English, and I've seen a bunch of them. Some of them I've been trying to like backwards translate or figure out what they were trying to say, even if that's not what they, because there's these things called evergales in the game, EVE or GAOL, and a gale in Irish, it actually means, I think it means friendship or relationship. Oh, but the term GAOL, if you were to Google it, you would come up with Kilmainham Jail, which is a jail in Dublin, which uses the pronunciation GAOL. But because of imperialism, a lot of Irish went through a process of backwards translation where stuff went from like English sounding words to spelling in Irish, or Irish words that were then which were then made into English words based on how they sounded. So for instance, Dublin, the word Dublin is Dovlin. Dove is black and Lin is pool. So black pool is what Irish people were calling Dublin. But, well, at least that's what they were calling that part of it that they then call, the English decided. There's actually a great Flanner Breed play called Translations that's about when the English basically anglicized all the place names in Ireland. But that's why in Ireland, most of the Irish names for places are not anything to do with the English ones, because there were different Irish names. Dublin is known as Ballyaughaclia. But one of the cool things about this game is I keep seeing a lot of this Irish shit pop up, or Gaelic, I should say Celtic stuff. But one of the, I wouldn't say frustrating, but like sort of From Software aspects of this is that like, I don't think there's any, whatever collective lore that exists here, I don't think it's like necessarily connected to Celtic mythology. I think it's their own weird thing that they're doing. But yeah, a lot of Scottish and Welsh accents. That's the type of stuff too. There's probably a lot of Breton stuff in here I'm not noticing, but it very much feels like I think as some of the pre-release people were saying it's very Norse. To me, it's not. To me, it's super, at least parts of it are super Celtic, but yeah, I don't know.
Nice. Good luck finding another podcast that'll bring that kind of stuff up. That's great. I imagine everyone's going to be calling them the Evergales, making a statement about that.
Yeah, Gale. Yeah, jail. It's a weird one. Irish is a weird.
That is so cool, man. But the world. What did you describe it as? Celestial. What was it again?
Yeah, I forget. Cosmic Purgatory.
Cosmic Purgatory. Yeah, that sounds
all those games.
That's great. I love that description. But what kind of world are we in here? Like, this isn't Lord Ran again. Like, what's going on? What's that opening cutscene explaining here? Where are we?
Couldn't tell you.
Really?
Couldn't tell you.
What?
15 hours in, having a fucking notion.
There's a giant glowing tree. What's going on, Danny?
There are some, there are some baddies who, there was grace in this world before, and the grace fell, and you're a tarnished, and you are coming to, I don't know, kill the 5 fuckers and then get the Elden Ring. Couldn't tell. There's a bunch of other people trying to do it in the world.
I love that description. Kill the 5 fuckers and then, I don't know. We'll get to the end.
Kill your 5 evil ex-boyfriends and restore the, I could, it like, not only do I not know, I don't care. It's
right.
Like, it's the same as like Bloodborne. It's like watching, an art house movie where it's not like a Tarantino movie where you're like, how people relate to each other and critical plot points are the joy of that type of thing. It's more a art house movie where, a Gaspar Noé movie or something where it's about the experience and like the world that's being pulled over your eyes. And the story for me, at least, is part of that. And like, I have come to conclusions on these games once I've completed them. Bloodborne, for sure. There's loads of the aspects of that lore that I have like dived into and like figured out, especially when you complete that game, because like so much of the lore of that game happens in the latter half. So in the same way, like if you were to ask me 5 hours into Bloodborne, 10 hours into Bloodborne, what this is about, I would have been like, I don't know, blood, pale blood, Father Gaza, don't know.
Exactly.
So yeah, I don't know, and I don't care that I don't know.
Nice. So it's carrying that tradition of the classic Dark Souls design where like, yeah, this opening cutscene didn't have to play. I don't give a shit.
Yeah. It's great. Like I watch every cutscene. I listen to like all of the writing is super interesting and snappy, and the item descriptions are wild and weird, and I love it. But also I'm trying not to think about it too much. There's in many ways like this is exactly the type of game you expect it to be. But it's just interesting how they get over the parts that you're not sure of, like the open world stuff. Yeah. And again, 15 hours.
Right. Yeah. In 5 more hours, you're going to be making a bunch of tweets. Like everything I said in the podcast was a lie. There's a million other things that I didn't even see yet. Great. Well, I'm excited for the careers to be extended for all these YouTubers doing their They're lore videos. I'm sure I'll be watching those in a month or two when I'm done the first 5 hours of this game when I get to play it. But systems, I've been reading the reviews, and there's something someone mentioned, I think it was in the IGN review, about a system called the Ashes of War. What's going on there? That's such a cool name for something that maybe isn't that interesting, or is it?
Yeah, it took me like an hour one day to try and figure out what the fuck this thing was, because I lost. They do have it, so they have like prompts that pop up on the screen. This is something people should know about. They have prompts that pop up on the screen. And in Demon Souls, they basically had a tutorial section where they retained all of these on the remake on PS5, where you could go through them all and they would show you them all again. So they kind of did something like this in here, but it's in your inventory. It's in like the last part of your inventory. There's a bunch of random icons, and each of them is basically, if you click on it, the pop-up will come up again.
Okay.
Which is really important, because at the start of the game is Ted teaching a lot of these super obscure, technical gameplay details, and you're like, I don't fucking care. I'm not going to use this, or I don't know what that means. What's a tier? What's a steed? What's an Ash of War? I don't know. The Ash of Wars are basically special moves that you can assign to weapons. And this is where a lot of, in my experience at least, this is where a lot of they really want you doing two-hand here comes into play, because I don't think you can do a lot of the sword or spear or, whatever one-handed flailing thing, Ashes of War, if you're holding a shield, because I think it does the shield one. You can hot swap between one and two-handed it's kind of awkward. A lot of the controls in this game were kind of awkward, because you like run with circle, which is hard when you're also trying to jump with the horse with X, or just in general. I was playing Horizon for a week, so of course I was accidentally having my flasks all the fucking time when I was trying to
worst.
Yeah. So it took like 2 hours to stop gulping my flasks, but I mean that's not the game's problem, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Ashes of War are like basically special moves that take. I guess they're all different, but like a lot of the ones I've been using take from the, whatever their magic bar is called this time. Faith or something.
Right.
I love these games. They're so dumb. So but you can also get them for the shields. Like I had one for the shield. It was basically it made like a wind, like little tornado knockback thing. And I had one which actually helped me kill the first big boss I was fighting on the sword, which basically was just like flailing strikes, and it just took chunks of health at him. And you can get these in loads of different ways. You can duplicate them as well. There's a whole system for that. I'm not quite sure what that's for. Okay. You can buy them. You pick them up a lot from fallen enemies or chests and things like that. And yeah, I do feel like it was one of the systems where I was having a bit of trouble killing some enemies, and I was like, okay, I need to take a step back and have a look at what the combat systems are here and see what I'm missing. And I realized I wasn't using that whole thing. And so I kind of spent some time learning that. But yeah, it seems like it's probably pretty important. You can also, I should say, there's a lot of like customization stuff in this game that you can level up your weapons and all that sort of stuff. You can kind of level up your gear. It's kind of different. I'm still trying to figure that out. But also these Ashes of War, you can assign them to, there's a couple of different things. There's like one sort of potion-y thing where you can make a special third type of potion that you can hot swap the things in it. And it's the same for the Ashes of War. If you're using a certain type of Ashes of War on a piece of equipment, you can hot swap them as much as you want. There's no cost to that. So I think it's probably a really important part for, mixing up combat against different types of enemies.
You brought up the customization there briefly, and I'm very curious, man, because I mean, this is the big part of Dark Souls for me too, is like, dude, the drip in these games is kind of insane. You can make your characters look however you want. Those Monster Factory videos was really good. I mean, it was fun watching the different designs. How deep is the customization in Elden Ring?
I did it at the start. They have a bunch of, I'm trying to remember how many classes there are at the top. It's the same as the technical test, I think. There was like somewhere between 6 and 9, something like that.
Nice.
But then in terms of the faces and stuff, I think I just went with one of the presets.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the preset faces, but then obviously there was body type and hair colors and all that sort of stuff. It looked, I would say, the same as other Soulsy stuff. I'm sure there are dials that have been tweaked here and there in relation to that, but none of it looked particularly different. The horse is just the horse as well. I don't think you can do anything with the horse to change the horse.
Yeah, you can't add anything on. You can't change its hair or anything or the outfit.
I
No?
don't. Maybe eventually
Right.
again.
Yeah,
but like,
5 hours from now again, same thing. I put armor on my
Yeah.
horse all of a sudden.
it's also like a ghost horse, so like it just disappears and reappears.
Oh, so you
it's
don't
like,
whistle it to you. You just spawn it wherever you are.
You literally whistle it to you and it appears underneath you.
Oh, okay.
So
That's
you,
cool.
you have a, like I have it assigned to, I hit triangle and down and he just goes, and then the steed appears. And then when you jump off it, it disappears.
Okay.
So it's a video game horse. If you want to go distances, that's why they have the horse there. I should say as well, the horse is super useful in combat, and there are definitely battles in this game that are like, you need to be on the horse for this part.
Nice.
Like,
Does that feel good? Because I feel like riding mounts and
Yeah.
doing combat is always kind of a pain in the ass. But that feels good.
Yeah. The timing in this, they do really well. I'm with you. I think like stuff like Red Dead, I had trouble doing some of the stuff. They have to slow the game down. They give you slow-mo when a lot of games are horses. All that stuff is good. I also think the camera work in this is better than previous games, or rather the controls of the camera. Like sometimes you're fighting like other enemies that are on horses as well,
Right.
or like, whatever, anything. There's lots of imagine these games. There's octopuses and bats. You know what I mean? Everything's in this game. So it's that type of thing where keeping folks on screen, all that thing, I think it's pretty good. This game is more, I don't want to say it doesn't have all the jank of these types of games, but it has significantly less of the jank than a lot of these games have in terms of controls and camera and all that sort of stuff. Like I have basically not had a problem at all with any of that stuff. Which is great because you're doing a lot more of it. You're doing a lot of weird shit like jumping up cliffs and jumping off things and fighting things while on horses and doing, jumping off a horse and then using a power attack in the air on somebody. You know what I mean? There's a lot more going on, and it's all felt good.
Awesome. That's so important because I feel like, as soon as I just got off of Twilight Princess, and that has so many, like Legend of Zelda, obviously, and that has so many like moments where you're riding the horse and you're trying to like shoot arrows at things or fight, and I'm like, I don't like this. And you're right, like Red Dead, I can't aim on a horse. The horse is bouncing. That's something I've had such a problem with this generation and last generation more so, is that like instead of everything being a car, everything's a horse now. And I'm so tired of riding horses everywhere and like having to deal with kind of awkward combat mechanics. It sounds like Elden Ring has really introduced ways to make the horse feel better from the jets that kind of push you up. And it sounds like the combat's a little more straightforward. Traversal mechanics though, I don't know if you're like 15 hours in, so Danny can't make super concrete comments here about what's going on in the game, but is there anything else movement wise other than just walking around, running around and jumping and riding the horse? Or
not really. And I think to your point about the horse stuff as well, and this also applies to traversal, I think a lot of what this game does well is that it doesn't try to do too much.
Okay.
I think if you were adding again, this is in why I feel like this game doesn't reinvent the wheel, because like the horse just works because the horse doesn't try and do too much. But what it does do, it does well, and it's great. You don't have to worry about it. You can use a horse, you can use a sword on a horse, great. You can Skyrim jump up mountains in this game. It has the weird jump pads for the horses. Like, there's no climbing, there's no like fucking, as far as I've seen, I haven't seen any. We're talking about Breath of the Wild and Horizon and whether, ways of getting down from stuff. I haven't seen any of that. The fall damage on this is pretty forgiving.
Okay.
And you're still doing a lot of the like in Dark Souls and Demon Souls, sometimes you're doing like, I'm walking on the edge of a castle on this like tiny piece of, assembly that's right here, or, masonry rather, that, and if you step one step to the side, you'll fall off, like that type of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of modern AAA games would have that be like a, you're scooched up against the wall, or it's a climbing mechanic. Whereas like the Soulsborne games just have you walking normally, but just don't fall off the edge, right? Like this game does that too. Like, so it's not, it's not trying to be this new, crazy new action adventure AAA type game that does all these very specific animations and does these very specific control mechanisms, all that sort of stuff. It basically controls in a fairly simplistic way, but it never gets gets you in trouble. it feels like this is going to say so reductive, but like those games always play to me like in my head they're like PlayStation 2 games. They're just like, the character moves in 8 directions, and you can sometimes you're just like walking along a platform, and like there's no mechanic to it other than don't fall off. And like I think so much of the joy of these games is that a lot of that stuff is relatively simple because they can go deep on the parts that matter. And this game does the same thing.
Nice. Because, yeah, I mean, I see the footage and I see the screenshots that have come out, and it seems like there's so much verticality to this game, like depth.
Yes.
It goes incredibly deep, but like, and towers are like actually towering. Like you see this, there's such an intense sense of scale in Elden Ring, just from what I've seen of like, you look up at a tower. Like I remember going to Toronto for the first time and looking at the CN Tower, and I'm getting that feeling looking at this footage that it looks like when you look up, you feel like you're going to fall backwards with how tall some of these buildings are. Is that something that came through for you?
I think one of the things that people sort of players took away from Breath of the Wild was the idea that the vertical space in open world games was kind of not utilized as well.
Yeah.
Maybe I think a lot of this, I don't know, I might be reading into it too much, but I think some of this comes from just like how Japanese countryside looks like as well, where you have a lot of these rolling hills and valleys and stuff. I don't like making too many comparisons to Breath of the Wild because I think it's a bit rote, but I think the one way in which this game definitely apes Breath of the Wild is that the discovery and like map uncovery and exploration in this game is even more vertical, and it's has to be a byproduct of the fact that this game takes place in nonsense cosmic world, right? Because like they can just do whatever the fuck they want. So, and in that way, yeah, you're always looking up, you're always looking down, you're always jumping up and down. If you see something in the distance, you can easily get there by just doing a fast travel, across the entire map and setting a waypoint and see what it looks like from this side. So it's just a fun game to like bounce around. Like there is no like climbing. You can do a little bit of like, Skyrim or Oblivion jumping up mountains, but like not a lot. Generally there's a way around something.
Right, but there is horse jank if you want to kind of use it to sidle up the side of something, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, they give you the double jump for a reason on the horse, which is useful for two things. Like sometimes there are like gaps up high, like you're jumping from a tower to a tower or like across a bridge and it's broken. And then sometimes, yeah, it's a lot of the like, the horse is there to basically get you places. Like it's used in combat a lot, but it's very much I need to get up to that castle and I need to jump across this mountain to do it. And the horse is like, all right, let's go, buddy. And did it. Just rarely are you stuck and trying to figure out where to go. And if you are, then you just fast travel somewhere else and take it out from a different angle.
So lots of opportunities to approach things in fun ways. That's good. But getting around and the things that you're doing, Dark Souls has this like classic joke that everyone ends up making about the names for bosses and enemies and stuff. It's either Elderborn, the great and unbecoming, or like Scrungo, the dirty freak. Like, just the funniest names for some of these bosses and shit.
Scrungo, the dirty freak. Love it. I used to drink with that guy.
Give it 3 more hours and you'll end up in a tavern with him. So are you running into any bosses like that are fun? I know we're not trying to spoil anything, but I feel like that's the kind of thing people are interested in, and I know I am as well.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of the early bosses are fairly not too crazy. Design wise, they're awesome. But like a lot of like kind of normal shit, I would say. So I think that's the way in which I have imagined that the next 15, 30, 80 hours are gonna really expand that way. So I would say they're more like, especially because so basically like the main area that you're in at the start of the game is the area they've shown in the trailers that has the big castle. So as a result of that, it's kind of like how in Demon Souls the Boletarian Palace was like, the characters in that were fairly obvious. It was like big knights and kings and dragons and shit like that, right? So like those aren't the crazy ones with the crazy names necessarily, but I have been to the other parts of the world that are crazier, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's definitely some fucked up shit here. Like there's definitely some super weirdly named beast that I'm going to have to. There was one I found in they have these dungeons that are like, they're hilarious. They're almost like I won't say much, but they're almost like a more like American Gladiator, or there was a TV show in UK for kids called Funhouse.
Okay.
Where they're kind of like a you know when you go to like the fairground and there's like a fun house that has like the ground moves and there's like
Okay, yeah.
spinny thing. There's these ones that have like they're basically just like environmental puzzles for you to like jump around and figure out how to get to the bottom of them. They're like a whole subset of dungeons there that you need like specific keys to get into.
Oh,
and
cool.
they're so funny. Yeah, they're so funny. It's just like one of them starts with like like a poison pit that you have to like run across. You're like, what the fuck was that about? And then there's like a big rolling thing that is trying to eat you up. At the end of that, there was a boss that was like a tree fetus. I don't know. It was really fucked up and it completely murdered
A
me.
treatise.
Yeah, it was. I couldn't. Like, I think I lasted like 5 seconds.
Nice.
The 20 times I tried to fight it, it was just impossible. And I was just like, oh fuck this. I'm leaving my ruins here. But
I'll come back for this fetus later.
exactly. That's the thing. I will. I'll come back to that fetus and I'll fucking chop its head off. And that's the cool thing. And because the game is an open world, you often run into areas that like are too hard and then you forget about them. And then 4 hours later, I'm like way more powerful and have better gear. And I'm like, oh, fuck this. I'm going back there. And it's easier. You know what I mean? So it's cool. There's always some new freak to kill.
Scrungo's coming back. So you mentioned puzzles there briefly, and I am just like so excited to see what's going on here. Because again, in the beginning part there, you did mention like doing weird things as a joke. Like early on, you were like, oh, if somebody mentioned that I have to do something at a specific time and do a pose in front of this lamppost in the middle of nowhere at 3 o'clock in the morning and then something will unlock, that's a joke. But also like, I feel like that's what a lot of people are going to be looking for in this, that kind of esoteric, weird puzzle stuff that comes with the Dark Souls world. Because that, I mean, getting to the painted world of Arameus is like, what? Are you kidding me? I remember looking that up and I'm like, this is ridiculous. How did someone figure this out? Have you noticed any kind of that stuff early on or just like good puzzles that you're enjoying? Yeah, so there is stuff like that? Okay, go ahead.
So that's the stuff I'm not going to talk about at
Come
all.
on.
There's definitely a lot of stuff in here that is like intentionally vague or like you'll need internet groupthink or like there are definitely like I think things that happen at certain times of day in certain places, or I've run into enemies that like I'm like, who are you and what are you doing here and what the fuck? You're different to everything else. And there are like even some collectibles you find that I think have some deeper meaning to them I haven't figured out yet. So yeah, I think I don't think there's like a crazy abundance of these things, but there's definitely a lot of them in there.
Right.
There could be loads. It's kind of hard to tell, but there is a lot of that. On top of everything else that there's a lot of. So I think, that's, this is going to be a game more than any other Soulsborne game that people will be playing for years and years and finding new stuff. And YouTubers are, VadiVidi is basically like sorted for the next 5 years off this thing. It's just like, and it has, because it has everything in the all games have almost, it has invasions as well. It has multiplayer. It has like, there's loads of stuff going on. The invasions I feel like in this one are actually better than, maybe it's because there's just a bunch of games journalists playing and a lot of them aren't great. I don't know. No offense to my peers, but like most of the invasions that have happened, I've been like, let's fucking go. I'm going to take another head, or at least I think they're maybe better balanced. I think the invaders can't use potions, I think. So you're sort of at a advantage maybe in terms of your ability to give yourself health again. But also a lot of them just aren't super great. I've been doing a lot of like very easy backstabs on some of these invaders. There's a lot going on. But yeah, a lot of that sort of like weird. A lot of stuff where like, again, Jason Schreier's notebook idea, not a bad call. Because I'm like, write down this weird thing that happened to me in the forest. I was like, I don't know what that was about, but that was kind of cool.
Okay. I mean, I can't wait for those conversations of like people talking about that, the schoolyard conversations. I think a lot of people describe it as of like, did you do this? Yeah. If you go over here, at this time with this item, it'll activate this. I can't wait for those kind of rumors and stuff to start floating around. Cause that's the fun. That's what I love about video games and what I miss about video games. And I think what Dark Souls does so well giving you so many weird esoteric things that you need to figure out and that everyone is always like thinking about weird ways of doing. The early days of a Souls game, that I think for me is nice to get in on because I played Dark Souls so late after it came out. Getting to talk about that stuff now and getting to be a part of it while it's happening is so exciting. And for it to be a game that's so large and builds on the design philosophy of previous Dark Souls or Soulsborne games I cannot wait for the coming weeks of conversations.
To that point, I think the tail on this is going to be longer just because it's bigger. So I think, I was really grateful to have this game early because even those moments where I was getting a little bit like, oh, I just love to like read how this particular mechanic works.
Yeah.
I had to put in the work to like figure it out for myself. And, that can be frustrating, but also it can be really rewarding. And what I do think is like, there's so much in this that it's going to be pretty hard to have it spoiled on you ultimately. I think even if you get a boss that you're not sure of and you just want to look up, like that's part of how these games are. Like these games are designed this way so that the community figures stuff out. Like it's not cheating. If you want to play it the purest way you think is possible, is like to me, the way I sort of like talk about these games, because people say like, oh, the only way to play these games, or the purest way, most important way to play these games is to play it straight out of the box on your own, don't know anything. To me, that's like a sporting event without the fans. Like maybe that's like, I guess the purest, like most distilled version of how you can play this thing is to remove that. But when you add the fans to a sporting event, it changes everything. It changes the dynamic. It changes the pace of the game. It changes, the down moments and the high moments. It's like the observer problem in quantum mechanics or something. By the virtue of the fact that there being people looking at the thing, it changes the thing. And if you were to ask people the best sporting event they went to, or the best game they watched on television, or the purest, best way to watch a game of soccer or basketball or baseball, it's with packed grandstands. And for me, these games are the exact same, where the whole meta like uncovery that happens around this game is part of the game. And maybe it's not the most distilled version that you want to play, but I don't think it's less valid. I think it's actually probably, for me at least, more valid. And I think it's going to be interesting over the next couple of weeks, as that sort of longer tail, because this game is so long and so deep and so, full of stuff to do and different ways of doing it. I think it's going to be really cool for the next few weeks to see people experience a lot of what the reviewers did, and then also have those little insights, those wonderful little insights. When Vagividi posts a video about like, oh, I didn't realize you could do X, and then everyone's like, I didn't realize anyway either, and then jump back in the game. Like, to me, like, it's the next couple of weeks are just going to be an absolute blast with this game.
Yeah, it'll be the only time that Twitter is actually fun to be on is the launch of Elden Ring.
Dude, has it gotten worse?
Oh, it's so bad.
I think it's gotten worse.
Oh, it's the worst.
Everyone, even like people I love and respect, all anyone uses it for is complaining. And like sometimes about things that are like, and then sometimes about like, just go for a walk. It's okay.
Dude, there are days where it's like there's one bad thing happened and that's all that's on Twitter. Everyone's talking about it. Why do I have to keep seeing these chuds getting I'm not trying to talk down or be mean to anyone, but please, I don't want to see the chuds on my timeline. I'm following you.
Stop.
Not the
stop
chuds.
Turning off retweets is like, that's maybe the only good thing they've ever done on that thing. But anyway, right now, there's only one thing people are talking about, and it's, what was he? Chumzor, the underling? Whoever you call him.
Scrungo, the dirty freak.
Scrungo, the dirty freak. Love it.
Chumlord is really good too, though.
Chumlord, yeah.
That should be a
chum bucket.
We got to get Frank to do that for Noclip crew. Just make weird characters with goofy names.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'd love that.
Yeah, I'll get Audrey to draw them all. Chumlord. Get some Discord emotes up here.
Yeah. Everyone, drop your Chumlords in the chat. Chumlords. But all right, is that everything you wanted to talk about here, Danny, about Elden Ring?
I think that's it, man. There's a lot to talk about, and there'll be a lot of people talking about it. And if you want to go deeper, I'm sure there are web videos out there. And if you want to not hear anything, I'm sure you probably aren't listening to me right now. Then, but yeah, it's cool. It's one of these it's our white whale in many ways as well for Noclip. Like I've said it before, we've talked to From in the past. They don't really want to do the type of thing we do. The design, they sort of let the game speak for themselves, and Miyazaki hates doing interviews, just full stop. I'm not saying it might never happen. We've been working, I had meetings 6 months ago with some people trying to figure out a way of making it happen in some way at some point. But for the moment, unfortunately, there won't be any Noclip stuff on From. I will say Noclip Crew allows us though to tackle the problem from loads of different interesting, cool angles. So I'm excited to do some stuff on their games over the next couple of whenever we got that fucking channel up in about a month's time.
Look forward to that. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be fun stuff.
I guess I should do the promo stuff then. Same as last week. We're actually, by the time you're listening to this, myself and Jeremy will be in the Navajo desert, actually, doing a overnight camp. We're doing one night, I think it is, in a
Nice.
Somewhere off the beaten path. We don't have an RV or anything, but I am going to camp in my Jeep or on my Jeep rather, and Jeremy is going to camp. He's bringing his tent. We're driving out and we're going to spend the night to basically record the Black Mesa stuff. Sorry, did I say Mojave? I meant Mojave. Jesus, I don't know my Native American tribes very well. Wait, is the Mojave a tribe? I don't even know if it is a tribe. I don't know Native American stuff enough. Sorry, we're going to the Mojave National Preserve. I found a couple of spots, basically something that looks generally like a mesa, so we can film the Black Mesa stuff. I have a scientist costume set up with the same color tie and shirt that they wear in Half-Life 1.
From the science lab.
Exactly, yeah. Why do we all have to wear these ridiculous ties? With my brains and your brawn, we'll make an excellent team.
Oh, man.
So
good.
Yeah, we're going to record that. I'm driving tomorrow. This time tomorrow, I'll be on the 7-hour drive to actually, it's probably closer to 9 to actually get to the place we're going. So we're going off.
Do you have a hazmat suit for Jeremy? I feel like he could just very easily turn into Gordon Freeman.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, if we could just stick him in one. That's a good point. God, I hadn't thought about that. I don't, but we do have, 0 degree or below freezing camping gear, because it is going to be below freezing overnight in the desert. I think it's -3 centigrade, so whatever that is in American 26 Fahrenheit or something in whatever you call it. What is it?
Fahrenheit,
whatever it is. Yeah. So that's gonna be fun. So we'll see about. We'll have the Black Mesa doc out and shortly after that, and then Among Us, and then Noclip Crew and everything else we talked about. At Danny Dwyer on Twitter, at Noclip Video, at Garasha.
Yo.
Make sure to sub to the channel, youtube.com/Noclip Video, youtube.com/Noclip Podcast. We should have youtube.com/Noclip Crew, but there's actually a bug on YouTube's side. They're trying to fix it for me.
Oh, so we're still youtube.com/channel/UX1/VM, all that.
Yeah. So we'll have I'm trying to see, I think we have like a couple of thousand subs over there already, and there's no videos on that channel. So it'll be coming soon anyway. But yeah, thanks for listening. We'll have some new podcasts. Maybe me and Jeremy will record something out in the desert, actually. I'm not quite sure, but we'll be back in March with some more good stuff. Jesse, have a blast playing the Elden Ring. How far are you in Horizon, by the way?
Oh, buddy, like maybe 8 hours. Everything broke on my end, so I'm like sad and frustrated. But very soon.
Oh, were you playing on PC?
No. I wish. No, no. It's just like, just frustration, just taking up brain power is all. But I'm very excited for Elden Ring. I was hoping to play it on PC. I'm probably going to grab it on PS5 now, play with my girlfriend's dad. We'll go around and gank some noobs.
Nice.
Make them feel bad. Yeah, I can't wait. Looking forward to Friday. And when you're listening to this, just like Horizon, the controller hasn't left my hand. It's still glued.
Exactly.
Don't worry.
Horizon is not out on PC yet as well. I should mention.
Not yet.
Just in case.
Yet.
Thanks so much.
We don't know anything.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know anything. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great Elden weekend, and we'll see you on the other side. Peace.